You know, if you've got a problem with somebody, you should just argue with them, fight them, cut them off, cancel them, do whatever it is just to get that person out of your life. Because if they don't agree with you or get along with you, you just don't need that negativity in your life. Hold on. Not so fast. Let's talk about this. Hello, I'm Methodist Dave. I'm a professional theologian and Bible teacher. And today we want to take a look at Lot and Abram and the conflict they had. Now, immediately after Abram got kicked out of Egypt for passing his sister off, his wife off as his sister, and Pharaoh almost taking her into his harem and being livid about that, he kicked Abram and Lot and all his possessions out, and they were sent back to the land that they came from. So we're not told about the drought being over, but we are told that Abram and Lot took their possessions and went back into the land of Canaan, modern-day Israel, and were wandering around from place to place. So since there possibly still is a drought, there's a little bit of a conflict. See, Abraham was very rich. He was probably rich in flocks and herds. That was how he would measure wealth. Had lots of sheep, lots of goats and other animals like that. And we read that Pharaoh gave him sheep and goats and camels and donkeys and other servants. So his wealth had been increased by the Pharaoh. And there's not enough grazing land for Abraham's herd and for Lot's herds. Now, we're not told how wealthy Lot is, but we're told that Abraham was very wealthy. And there's not enough grazing for both flocks. And the herdsmen are getting into a conflict with each other. Wisely, Abraham wants to avoid conflict because he knows that, fights over watering holes, fights over grazing land, sheep kind of eat the grass right down to the ground. So they can denude an area very rapidly. So you have to constantly keep them on the move, and you want to find lush vegetation so that they would be healthy while they're grazing. So you're always looking for a new place to graze them, and there's only so much grass to go around. So rather than allow conflict to increase, Abraham determines that we're going to separate from each other while we're still friends, because Abraham doesn't want his herdsmen and Lot's herdsmen to become enemies, and that could bring them into conflict. So in order to resolve conflict, Abraham does something interesting. He says, look, Lot, take a look around. Pick a direction. Whichever direction you go in, I will go the opposite. If you go north, I will go south. If you go south, I will go north. If you go east, I will go west. And if you go west, I will go east. Let there be no conflict. So Lot looks around, and he likes the valley of the Jordan. And that heads on down to the land of the cities of the plains, Sodom and Gomorrah, and the other cities there. And he says that's lush, and that looks very appealing. And Lot says, I think I'm going to head down there. Now, if you know anything about the geography of the area around the Dead Sea, where Sodom and Gomorrah and the other cities of the plain were located, is not a lush, inviting valley. Now, it's kind of dry and desolate, kind of arid, and the water in the Great Dead Sea, nothing lives in it. That's why it's called the Dead Sea. The salt content is so high that you can literally sit in the water and float in a seated position because the water has nowhere to go. So it just puddles and evaporates. But at one point in time, it was a lush valley, and probably there was an outlet for the Jordan River, which flows into the Dead Sea. Maybe a subterranean cavern. Maybe the land sank through some seismic activity. Whatever the reason, if the water could flow through, it would be a thriving, vibrant, living ecology. But because it doesn't go anywhere and just evaporates, it becomes toxic. Well, at the time, Lot moves his tents towards the city of Sodom and Gomorrah. And we're told it's a wicked place. There's lots of reasons why it was wicked, and we're not going to talk about that today. We'll talk about that later when we get to the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. But for the time being, Lot is living near that area. He's living on the grassy plains, and his herds are multiplying. And Abraham is living up in the land of the Canaanites in modern-day Israel, and everything's all good. Then we're told that there is some kings from the plains of Shinar from Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, who decide to exert authority over the valley of southern Jordan. And they put the kings of Sodom, Gomorrah, Zoar, and the other cities that were located in that, at one time, lush area, because archaeology tells us that there was a large population living there. So there must have been food, they must have been able to provide for themselves. And they put them under subjugation, and the cities rebel. So the kings come and make war with these cities, and they overcome the kings of Sodom, Gomorrah, Zoar, and the other cities. And they take them captive. They sack the city, they break through the walls, and they would take away all the food and all the fabrics and whatever the wealth that city had. They would be rounded up and taken home as spoils of war, and the people were captured and brought back and sold into slavery. Slavery is not a new concept. It has been around since the beginning of time. Every culture around the world has had slavery in some form or another. So these people were captured to be sold into slavery. Well, someone comes and tells Abraham about this. Now, of course, if Abraham had been living in our cancel culture, he would say, well, he's getting what he deserves. We don't care about him. Let them go. We're okay here. No, Abraham was not Lot's enemy. There was a disagreement between them. There was a problem with supplies. But Abraham did not want there to be conflict, so he sent Lot off. Now his nephew has been captured because Lot is now living in the city of Sodom. Before he was living near Sodom, now he lives in Sodom. He's become a part of the system. And Abraham sets out with a group of 318 trained men. I like how it says trained men. What are they trained in? Well, if you've got vast herds and you've got a lot of cattle and you need them to be protected, then you're going to need people who are able to defend them. So these guys were trained not just in taking care of sheep and goats and camels and donkeys. They were trained in the art of war. 318 special forces. And he takes these men, these trained soldiers, because in the ancient world there were very few trained soldiers. They would give you a stick with a rock at the end, maybe if you could afford a sword or a spear. But a lot of battles were fought with sticks and stones. And these were professional soldiers, like the Spartans. And they caught up with the raiders, and they pursued them as far north as Damascus. The Dead Sea to Damascus in Syria. That's a long trip. And Abraham's men overcome these foreign kings, caught them in the middle of the night, overwhelmed them, and he retrieved all the people that had been carried away, including his nephew Lot and his family. So you see, if we don't get along with somebody, or we don't believe with them ideologically, or we have problems with somebody, that doesn't mean that we still can't help them when they're in need. As a matter of fact, that should be our first thought, to help our neighbors in need. If you have questions about this or any other topic, drop me a line, methodistdave@gmail.com. I want to thank you all for joining me today, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.